Hello and welcome to the Blick painting party. I'm your host tonight, Julie Swanson Davis, and I just would love to know, how is your holiday season going this year? I know we're between times now, but what a great way to get together with your friends and with your family and do a painting together. We have one tonight that we're going to be doing that has been designed really with the non-painter in mind, with somebody who might just be a little bit shy around a paintbrush. And we've designed it with using a few materials beyond the paintbrush. So stay tuned. We're going to start in with a demo. First of all, I've got my friends surrounding me here tonight. I've got Rick and Whitney here in the studio with me. And of course, I've got you, my friends out there. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope we're going to have a really good time tonight. Just pour yourself a little adult beverage if you've got a little nervousness going about painting, or just to make it a little bit more fun. And we're going to get started. But first, I would like to tell you the great news, and that is we're going to be giving away a $100 e-gift coupon that we're going to be able to just send right to you, right across email, if we draw your name. So we've got a random means of selecting names, but we need to know you're here. So we've got just a little conversation starting question for you. We'll just get a little bit of talk and chatter going beyond here. And if you have any questions, just please come out and ask them, and we'll try to get them answered just as soon as possible. We are going to be doing a Winterberry Cardinal. This is the perfect painting leading into the new year. It's bright, it's metallic. If you notice the surface here, I'm just going to move it just a little bit, hopefully to catch some shine for you. Snowy, bright, beautiful, and it's great for giving to somebody or just enjoying during the winter, hanging on your own wall. Let me tell you a little bit about the materials we're going to be using. Some things we mentioned on our materials list. If you had a chance to check it out, you might need to have some paper towels handy. You will definitely need to have a cup of water to rinse your brushes out. I am using a thick, flat brush. And if you go to our materials list, click on that link, you'll be able to see exactly what size and what type of brush. I also have a smaller flat brush and brand new ones. Oh, I love to just break the sizing. They're so soft. And then I have a round and thinner brush as well. You will need to have something to put your paint out on. I have palette paper. I prefer to use this more so than a foam brush or something. It's a pad of paper, but it has a coating on one side of the paper so the paint doesn't bleed through to the next sheet. And so when you're done, you just pull that off and throw it away. And it's super easy and tidy to use. You'll need a pencil, which I'm kind of assured that you would have, a household sponge, or just a portion of a sponge, and you need about, 3 cotton balls, 4 cotton balls, regular size. Jumbo ones will work, you just need less, and maybe 3 or 4 cotton swabs to have on hand. Beyond that, we are going to be using, first of all, let me show you a canvas in its packaging. I don't know if I'm getting too much reflection on that. I'll hold it down just a little bit. This is our Blick Studio Traditional Canvas. It's a 16 by 20 surface. Of course, you can make it smaller than this, maybe even larger if you want to. But this, I've chosen to use a 16 by 20. It has a 3/4 inch profile on the side here, and it's back stapled, meaning that you get a nice clean edge along the side here, and those ugly staples are hidden along beside or behind the part here. So that is what I would recommend to use. And our paint tonight is the Blick Studio Acrylic. Now, if you're not familiar with our Studio line of acrylic, we had this developed to kind of fill a gap that we had between our student acrylics, which are great for the classroom, and our professional, wonderful Blick Artist acrylics. And I love the Artist acrylics, but sometimes the price point's a little higher than you would like. If you're just learning to paint, or you just want to do a lot of experimentation with paint, the Blick Studio Acrylic is really a great line. It comes in a number of sets and 60 different colors, including metallics that we're going to be incorporating tonight, fluorescent colors, and they're very opaque. They're very covering. Not all of them are opaque, but they're very covering. That means you don't have to go back and make multiple layers in order to get a solid covering. The reason why is because we really use a high amount of pigments in the production of these paints. And the pigments are not only concentrated, but they have been mixed and ground before being run through a traditional steel 3-roll mill. That's how they create the professional lines of paint, is through 3 steel rolls, rolling the paint through. Perhaps you've seen some great YouTube videos out there. Wendy's nodding her head because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Beautiful seeing paint being made going through these mills. And that's how this paint is made. And we do consider it a high-grade student quality paint. All right, so I think I've started us out with just a good introduction to materials. Let's start by painting, shall we? Now, I've started already painting the background a gold color. And the reason I wanted to get it started a little bit ahead of time is because, first of all, I want to be able to show you, as it dries, the metallic shine that comes through here. And when it's first wet on the canvas, when I first start painting it, you don't quite understand how metallic it is. As with many acrylic paints, there's a color shift that happens. As it dries, you see that the colors change a little bit. In a professional grade of acrylic paint, there's care taken so that doesn't happen as much, because you're going to be doing careful mixing. We are not going to be mixing tonight, and I know those of you who are starting painters and we're a little bit worried about how I'm going to be able to mix colors, I am just setting your mind at ease right now to let you know we're not going to mix colors. If you've got 60 colors in the line, why do you need to mix? We're going to just use them from the tube. So I'm finishing off this painting the surface, covering it with the gold paint. And if you'd like, you could go ahead and paint around the edges. Because if you're going to be displaying this painting as I am here on an easel, or if you're going to be hanging it up on the wall, you can have, instead of having white edges to it, you could have gold edges. You can always wait until the very end and paint the edges if you decide to, or you might want to leave them white, or you might even want to paint them the dark brown that we're going to be using too. Kind of up to you. I'm going to leave mine for the time being. I know I'd like to paint them gold, but to be honest with you, I keep leaning into the canvas and I'm going to have it all over me if I've got the sides painted. True, very true. Okay, so now ideally we'd give this a little time to dry. I'm just getting it a little wet here because yours is going to be wet. I hope you're painting along with me tonight. If not live, then at some time in the future. And if you ever want to just have a good time with friends or something to do in the evening, then you'll have this painting to go through and you'll have time to get your supplies all together and just follow along in real time as we make it. All right, I'm going to bring up a cup of water here to set my brush in for now. And I feel a little paint on my hand, so I'll wipe that off. Another thing you might want to consider, especially if you have sensitive skin, is wearing a pair of gloves and definitely removing rings that you don't want to get paint on, like I just did now. Have on hand, I said, a little bit of a household sponge. So I've got just a portion of mine here. I'm going to dip that into some water, just make sure that it's damp. And on my palette paper, I'm going to put a little bit of the white paint. Now, how much? Because I know I'm off camera here. Let me move that over so you can kind of see. It's a little bit bigger spot than a quarter. This paint is kind of thick, so it stands up a little bit, but let me move this over so we can see what I'm doing. I'll hold it here. I'm dabbing the sponge into the paint like this. And the next thing I'm going to paint in the background is the circle that I interpret as being the sun. On a winter day, sometimes with all of the snow flying in the air, you would have kind of a blurry look at the sun, right? And my paint underneath here, my gold paint, is still a little wet. I purposely made it wet because if you just started on painting your background, then yours is going to be wet too. So I'm dabbing it around in a circular shape, and then lightly with my sponge, I'm just going to create a circle all the way around like so. And then I'm just going to dab a little bit more white so that it's a little solid around the middle part. Now, I painted my background gold, but what I didn't mention to you in the beginning is if you'd rather have a really cool painting with cool tones in the background and really make that cardinal pop off of the background, you could also use a silver paint. And instead of doing gold in the background, you could go apply silver paint over the entire background ahead of time. That's an option. All right, I'm going to put that little sponge away for now. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a branch for that cardinal to set on. That arching branch you see in this image here that goes from one side to the other, that's what we're going to do next. You have your pencil handy. Now, you don't have to measure or anything, but I want you to take a look at this canvas and imagine where the center of this canvas is. You can hold your pencil here and just kind of look and see if it's about halfway. And then about halfway this direction. Okay, that would be about the center of your canvas. But we don't want it to arch right in the center. We want it to arch over here a little bit to the right to give the cardinal a place to sit. So come over about 4 inches perhaps, and then put an X right there, kind of lightly. My pencil is a rather hard lead pencil, so it's going to be light anyway. All right, now determine where the branch is going to start on either side of the canvas. If you want to follow along with exactly what I've done on the example here, I'm starting over in the corner on this side, about 3 inches up from the bottom. I'm going to put another X. Paint's still pretty wet over here, so it shows up very well. And then over on this side of the canvas, can we see that in the shot? Am I in the shot? Then I'm going to come up about, let's say about 4 inches. Make this one just a little bit higher and put an X there. So I'm going to be painting a single line that goes from this side all the way through those X's. Now you can go between, that's kind of a long distance to go between the left and the top. So you can put another X there, just give you another point. And you could even do it here, just another point to follow. All right, so I've got a series of X's, and now we're going to play connect the dots. branch is going to be this burnt umber color. Burnt umber is a really nice dark neutral brown. It's not reddish. It's actually pretty cool. So it's a good winter brown. I'm going to go down to a little bit smaller square brush to make this branch. And I'm going to come over, and I've got another portion of the burnt umber here. And I'm just going to load my brush up pretty full with that. You can see it's got quite a bit on it. I can either go both sides, so it's pretty thick. And I'm going to start over here on the left side on this X. And I'm just going to connect it to the next X and connect that to the next X and then bring it down. Now you notice it got a little bit fuzzy as I started to run out of paint. That's okay, but because now I know where the branch is going to be. And so now I can go back and add a little bit more paint over the top of that, just scooping up some more of that brown and fill in that line. And if you did happen to get it off a little bit, you can kind of correct it a little. All right. Now we need to put some more branches in because this is a winterberry bush and they can have some dense branches, so we need to put a few in there, and then we'll get to the berry part of it. Now the next branches, they're not quite as important as the one that our main focus, that cardinal, is going to be sitting on. So if you want to, you can do the same thing that I did with that first branch and mark them off with X's, or you can just dig right in and put the branches in place. I think I'm going to, let's see, I think I'm going to put one that goes more from the center of the canvas down here to the bottom. Okay, and I would recommend that if you're going to mark them, then paint them, because I have been known to make the mistake of going to the wrong X, as you could well imagine. That can happen. But this time I sped it up a little bit by just doing the two X's and then connecting them. It's okay if it gets a little thicker on one side or somewhere. Okay, it stays a little bit fuzzy on the edges. They do not have to be clean, crisp edges by any means, especially since we're going to be putting snow on top of them. All right, next branch. I'm going to do a thicker one that goes from just above that one up to the top of my canvas. So X and X. Bring my paint back in. And go up to the top. You guys having fun yet? Oh, you can't be stressing this yet. You've got a bird to paint. I'm just kidding, because I have a really easy way for you to paint this bird. Do not worry. Do not fret the bird. I will show you an easy way to do it. And you will be amazed that you can paint a cardinal. All right, so I cleaned off the brush that I just used. Actually, you could just set it over here in the water for now. And now I'm going to take that smaller round brush because we've got our main branches in here, but we need to have some of those smaller ones that you see coming off. And those smaller ones, the berries will be attached to. And it'll just make it look more bush-like if we have multiple branches. So let's just start with the one I just painted. Somewhere down here towards the middle, make another line that goes up off the top of the canvas. And let's do another one next to it. Now when you're painting, you don't need to press down very hard. And at the same time, You don't need to do it so lightly that you don't get any paint off of it, like that. It's just kind of a medium stroke. I like to hold my brush maybe towards the middle a little bit more, unless I'm doing really detailed work. I hold it right there in the middle, and if I held it here, it'd be a little more delicate. If I held it up here, it's going to be a little stronger use. So if you hold it in the middle, that should be just about right. Now, off of the line that I just painted, I'm going to do another line. There again, if that's a little scary for you, you can always do the X first, and then you can always do the X first and then paint to the X. I got to remember to keep bringing this canvas into the area that I'm painting. It's a big canvas, really, and I want you to be able to see all of it as I'm painting, but the one that the bird's going to sit on, we don't need too many strokes in it, but let's just do one that comes off this way, and maybe a little one that doesn't reach the edge. It just kind of, if you make the stroke and then just kind of lift your brush as you bring it off the canvas, then you get a little bit of a pointed look to that stroke, and that could be a little bit more branch-like. Okay, let's do a few more branches. You can see, you can follow along on here to see where some of those branches are. Let's try another one of those where we lift the brush. So coming up to the top one again, let's make sure I've got that right where you can see it. We're going to put the brush down and lift it up as we come off of it. And that makes it point a little bit. If yours doesn't look exactly like that, don't worry about it. It's going to look branch-like no matter what. And I'm going to go down here to the bottom. Each time that I'm making one of these branches, you may not see it because it's off camera, but I'm coming back and I'm getting that brush fat with paint. See how it's nice and fat and loaded up with paint? Okay, now we're going to touch that brush again. This time I'm going to go off the page, and then from that one I'm going to go drop my brush in the middle and do one of those where I lift it up. Okay, well, you can just go on and on and on with lots of branches. I do think I need one more off of here, but by the time you've got this many, you're doing pretty good. So why don't I just call it good and we'll stop with the branches. Now, let's put the paint down, wipe it off of my fingers here, and let's clean our brushes because we are going to need to use a couple of those again. I'll push my canvas up a little bit here so you can see how I'm cleaning my brushes. I'm pushing them down against the bottom of my water cup so that the paint that's all the way up there, that it kind of scrubs that off and pushes it off. Then I'm going to take a paper towel and I'm going to kind of wrap it around the end of those bristles and dry it off, and that of course will remove any of the extra paint that's on there. I see I dragged my paper towel through the white, so now I've got white all over my hands. You know, if you know me, folks, I've got paint on my hands at all times. Right, Whitney? Do I not have paint on my hands at all time? I do, always. And on my clothing. And Whitney, she's the same way. That's why we're good friends, right? Yeah. Yes. Friends who can be creative together, folks. All right. Oh, my goodness. Look what I did. Well, as I said, on my clothes at all times. Folks, what I forgot to mention, before you start painting, an apron is a good idea, and this is why. All right, so we are using acrylic paints, And this is not going to come out of my clothing. I'm okay with the apron because really this is the last in our series of our holiday projects. So my holiday apron is probably going to be retired now, and I'll just use it for when I'm off camera. And as for the shirt, it was a thrift store find anyway. Shh. Okay. Now, let's talk about painting that cardinal, shall we? I have put on the website with the materials list. And if you haven't been there yet to check out the materials list, you'll want to do that at some point because first of all, there's instructions that go step by step exactly with what I'm doing here tonight. And sometimes it's just easier to read instructions. I like to watch videos, but sometimes I like to be able to read them too. So if you go to that link and you'll find our materials list, instructions, a photo to follow, and a template. Yes, I have the shape of the bird already there for you to simply print out on a letter-sized sheet of paper and trace onto your canvas. Okay, it's a simple shape. Just follow the black lines and of course if you're doing this with friends, I would make sure that everyone has their own template. He's going to pick up a little bit of paint because my white here is still a little wet. So to hand it off to somebody else and put on their canvas, you might get paint where you don't want it to be. Now I'm going to place him so that he is sitting just above the branch. So if we look at this area where his body meets his tail, we don't want it sitting on the branch necessarily. We're going to put it just a little bit above because his little feet would be holding onto the branch. And because it's still a little wet underneath there, it's going to hold it in place for me very nicely while I grab my pencil. And because my pencil is a little light, I want to do it a little heavier than I'd require you to do because I would like you to be able to see it. And I actually am etching in an area here around where the paint is. I would use probably a 2B pencil, something along that. We'll give you a little softer lead that will show up on the canvas maybe a little bit better than. I'm picking up a little paint as I'm tracing, so I will clean my pencil off every now and then just to make sure that I'm still able to write with it. And okay, now I'm going to pull that off. And there's the shape of the bird. Now carefully I'm going to fold this over and move it out of the way because if I leave painted things around, this is the type of things that happen to me. Okay, let's make some Cardinal Red. I put that over on this side of the table. This is actually a Cadmium Red Medium Hue. A true cadmium paint made with cadmium is actually a toxic semi-toxic material and would require a little bit of caution when used in painting. We don't have to worry about this because the word hue tells us that this isn't made with cadmium but hues that resemble cadmium. So we're just going to paint in that shape that we just traced. We might pick up a little bit of the white underneath there. If it's still wet, that's okay. We can always come back and overpaint anything with a second coat if we feel that it needs it. And you might need to get out the small brush again in order to get into these tight spots. Now I do recommend keeping the small square brush, the flat brush, And just using a little less paint as you get into those little corners. You can just kind of make a line along there and with here, but some people might be a little more comfortable switching to a smaller brush. That's fine. The flat brush really is my favorite to paint with. How about you, Whitney? What's your favorite shape of brush to paint with?
I absolutely love a filbert.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Whitney, her favorite brush is a filbert. And a filbert brush is a lot like the flat brush that we're using, only the top of it is in a rounded shape. So that would be real handy, like when we were coming down here on the tail and we wanted to round out the edges of the tail. If we had a filbert brush, that would be super easy to use. But I wanted to keep our materials list a little small, so I'm just going to leave the tail a little bit square. But do you see how I didn't line it up? I just kind of, are we able to see that okay? Is it on the edge? Good. I just kind of turned my brush around. You don't even have to do that. You can just come this way. And so it's not exactly straight across because, of course, it's feathers, right? Okay. Now I'm going to take that brush, and I do happen to have a fresh cup of water down here next to me. I'm just going to stick that brush in the water for now. I don't really need to clean it off until I'm ready to use it again. I'm going to bring out a darker red now, and these are going to be, we're going to make the berries, the winter berries that are on this beautiful bush are going to be two different colors. Some of them are going to be darker than others, some of them are going to be lighter than others, because in nature you would see different colors. Some of them in shadow and some of them older. This is called an alizarin crimson. So this is a very purplish red. A very dark, good burgundy-ish red. And I don't need too much of that, so I'm squeezing out a little bit smaller pile so that I don't waste more paint than I need. And this is where we're going to use something other than a brush. And I think you'll like this. Just a simple cotton swab here. I'm going to put that into the paint on one side. And then I'm going to create berries and kind of concentrate them around a smaller branch, because they would be growing out from the smaller branches, correct? They'd be on the sides there. Things I want to warn you against, because especially if you're a first-time painter, you might be tempted to do this and put them in a line, put them exactly spaced apart, you know? And especially if you have, you know, those tendencies to kind of line everything up neat and tidy. And Whitney, I'm looking at Whitney again, and she's laughing at me. She gets that. Yes, those tendencies. So what I would recommend you do to kind of avoid that perfect formation that really nature doesn't do, just take and bounce it around quickly in that area. Just dab, 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 dab as fast as you can. All right, let's go find another of those small branches, like this one up here. Dab, 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 dab. And in fact, I'm going to put a few more around in this area. Dab, 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 dab. And some of them actually end up lighter than others. Some of them have a little bit lighter in the middle. That's great. That looks really, really natural. Okay. Let's dab around this one right up here. Dab, 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 dab. And again on that side. And as a matter of fact, you can go right on top of those branches. For the most part, they're dry now, if I wanted to overlap some of the smaller ones. For the most part, they're dry. And in the meantime, if you do pick up a little bit, that's okay. A little bit of brown, that's going to be just fine. And here's a smaller branch over here next to our bird. So I'm going to just dab around it. And if you're really not sure on this, You can always have a sheet of paper or paper towel handy and practice a few of these before you dig into your painting, but it's so easy. I just don't think practice is necessary. And I also want to bring them down to the edges of the canvas too, because of course in nature, the berries don't stop at the edge of the canvas. The berries would be going off the edge and out of sight. I'm just filling in a few areas with some berries. All right, now I'm going to move that out of my way, and I'm going to get another swab, a clean swab out. With this one, I'm going to make some lighter berries. And these berries would use the Cadmium Red Medium again. They're going to be maybe catching the sun a little bit. Maybe they're fresher berries. Maybe they're not quite as mature. So in the same general area where I have made the darker berries, now we're going to go back and add some lighter berries, little oranger berries, like so. While I'm doing this, I do want to remind everybody that we are giving away a $100 e-gift coupon that we're going to just mail out to you, email out to you. Can be to you yet this evening or tomorrow, depending on how fast we can hear from you. We do a random drawing from the names of everybody in attendance tonight. Get a fresh one if it gets a little dirty. So we just need to know that you're there. Of course, most of you, I'm sure, like and follow us on Facebook, don't you? I'm sure you do. Because why on earth would you want to miss some of these great, great demos that we have? And then tell us, answer the prompt that we have. We have a conversation starter, just a little question for you to answer in your own words so that we know you're out there, we know it's you. So please talk to us. Love to hear your response. All right, that's pretty fun. Now I'm going to reach in here and grab another cotton swab, and if your hand's getting tired, pause and take a rest. But this time I'm going to throw in some snowflakes. So I've got white paint, and now I'm going to concentrate in the areas between the branches where we don't have any berries. You know, pink snowflakes are not going to be great. So I'm trying to avoid areas where we have berries, and if the branch is dry, you can go over it. This area of the sun where we just have a little light, there again, I see myself spacing them evenly. Snowflakes don't space themselves evenly. So if I find myself doing that, I'll just stop and put a conglomeration of them in, and that'll break up the monotony. It's snowing! Yeehaw! A pretty snow like this is nice, though. I gotta love that. All right, I'm going to put my palette aside, and I'm going to bring this painting up and kind of move it around to make sure that we're seeing everything on the canvas, because I know some of the corners can kind of fall off of view up here. We want to be able to get you in as close as possible with the camera, but that might mean we cut something off. So let me just hold it up here and display it to you and see where we're at so far. All right, we're gonna let it dry over here in the berry snowy area. So while we're doing that, let's work on our cardinal a little bit. If your round brush is not exactly clean, this is a good time to clean out your brush. And we're going to start with the beak of the cardinal. I'm going to reach across there and get a little yellow paint. This is a cadmium yellow deep hue. So it is kind of an orangey yellow, which works well for a beak. Bring my palette up over here. And I'm just going to turn that beak area into a triangle. So with my small brush, I'm going to paint over the top. Now the red's a little bit wet underneath here still. That's quite all right because it's going to actually mix in with my yellow and make the beak a little bit more orangey. That's kind of my plan. I had that in mind all along. All right, move that back over into the water and clean that off. And again, when we clean our brushes, make sure the brush goes down to the bottom and you use a little bit of pressure to work the paint off. I happened to get a little yellow paint on my brush, so I want to make sure that I get that cleaned off. Sometimes a wet wipe is a good thing to have around. If you don't, I do have a little bit extra water over here, so I'm just going to clean the handle of the brush off to help save my fingers a little bit there. Now, to know that this is a cardinal, it's very obvious that he has this dark, if I can point it out to you, that dark area behind the beak. And the eye would be in that area as well. I'm going to load up with a little of my burnt umber, my brown paint, and come behind the beak with the small brush again. And I'm going to do just kind of a half circle, stopping here at the top of the head and just kind of making a half circle behind there. It comes down over the top of his breast just a little bit. So I'll bring that line down like so. All right, now the other thing, just to give it a little bit of dimension, is to create a little bit of feather or shadow along the back side and in the tail. So I'm not loading any more paint on my brush. So there's very little. If I hold it here, you can see there's very little paint actually on that brush. And with that, I'm just going to start at the bottom of the tail and pull upwards. And it's going to start to get a little of that graininess, and I'm just making a few lines. I'm using a very light stroke, so it's going up and I'm lifting again to do that same thing I did with the branches. Now, I'm getting just a small amount of paint on there again, and I'm going to actually on my palette here work a little bit of that off so that I know it's not very loaded with paint, just a little bit. Now I'm going to kind of bring a line from the top, and you can do this in multiple strokes or in one strokes, and just bring it along the back side of that bird. Gives it a little bit of shadow, a little bit of dimension, and you really know that that bird has 3 dimensions to it. And I'm going to clean that brush off again. Get a fresh paper towel here. After we clean the brush off, we want to use a paper towel to squeeze the end, the bristles, and make sure that that'll bring out any paint that happened to be in there, but also make sure that we're not wet and have water with it. Okay, my friend the white paint, who has become very close to me tonight. Now we're going to put just a little white on the front of the bird. That's the highlight. That's the where the sun here is creating a little bit of a highlight on it. The same thing I did over here with the brown. I'm going to scoop a little white, but then I'm going to go back and forth on my palette to work most of that paint off so that my brush has very, very little paint in it. And now I'm just going to do the same thing, a couple strokes up and down the belly of the bird there. It turns a little pink. It certainly isn't a nice clean stroke. It's very brushy, very very light, very hardly even there. Put a little of those in the tail too. And that is quite the bird, isn't it? Aren't you happy? Look at that. Look at that. You were able to paint a cardinal. You could do this. All right. Now the last thing that I'm going to do is the snow that you see on the branches. That just kind of gives it a little bit of texture, a little bit of dimension, and it just looks random on top of the branches. How are we going to do that? Well, here's another secret. We're going to use cotton balls. Now, did you know, this is something kind of new to me, but did you know that cotton balls can be unwound? They do. They are actually rolled up into a strip like this. So you can unwind it, pull it apart, and I'm just going to use half of that. And then I'm going to take that half, I'm going to pull it apart, set that half aside, and this is going to be my first little bit of snow that I'm going to lay on one of the branches here. Now, how am I going to get it to stick? You could use glue, definitely, and you could use Mod Podge. I have a Mod Podge mat here that would keep it nice and bright and white. I also have a really beautiful Mod Podge sparkle. So let's just say that I wanted to add a little glitter, a little sparkle to this. I could use this instead. Actually, I think I'm going to use a combination of both. And because I have palette paper, I'm going to remove the one that has all of this paint on it for now. And I will set that down at the bottom of my card here so that I don't get even more colorful than I am. And I would just need to have one of my brushes. I think I will use the small square brush, but because my water has got a pink tint to it, let me get some clean water out. I was anticipating this, so I actually filled a few more cups to have them ready. And now I'm going to push my brush down against the bottom of the clean water, and then I'm going to pinch that water off and the color off of that brush. And let's squeeze some of that Mod Podge off onto the palette paper. When it comes out, and I just squeezed a small, kind of a quarter-size puddle out to start out with, it looks white. It looks very, very white, but if you've worked with Mod Podge at any time, you know that Mod Podge dries clear. So don't worry the fact that it looks white. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come along the top of my branch, and that's where the snow always sits, is on top of the branch, right? So I'm just going to add a few dots of Mod Podge and lay the cotton down into that. Then I can take and brush over the top. Now, you don't have to necessarily brush all of it. And I did find a wet spot on my branch. That's good. I wanted to show you that. That's going to happen. All right. So I left a little bit of the cotton up there uncovered with the Mod Podge. That's only so that I can have a little more dimension to the snow. Snow doesn't fall totally evenly unless it's on a flat surface. And I'm going to finish off on the bottom part of this branch with the same technique. Let me move it over a little bit here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Same technique. Laying the cotton into it. Now, the reason I'm not too worried about that, where I actually got some of the brown into it, is because I can always come back and put some white paint on top of there if I want to. Or I can just pretend that that's where the branch is showing through. So back to my cotton ball here. I had torn it in half Then I tore it in half again, so let's tear this piece in half again. And let's come to this branch that's arching down this way. Just put a little bit of the Mod Podge, acting like glue, over the top of it. Lay the cotton ball down into it. And I'm just going to come over the top of the cotton ball with a little more Mod Podge. And that gets it to stick down. I know I'm going off the top here, folks. If the cotton hangs off the edge of it, that's great. We don't really need to stop at the edge of the canvas because nature, of course, does not do that. Nature will keep on going. We know there's no more bush there, so there'll be more snow. I'm squeezing out a little bit more matte Mod Podge. Just a reminder, folks, we're going to give away that $100 e-gift card, and we are really getting kind of close to the finish of this painting party. So you have a little bit of time here. If you're just joining us or popping in to see what's going on, make sure that you have responded to our question and that we're hearing from you, because that's how we're going to get you in the drawing. Okay, I'm going to move that back because I want to make sure that you're able to see. It's really repeating what I did on that other branch, but I am picking up a little bit of brown paint because it is still a little wet under there. I've torn just a small piece of cotton ball to finish up here. Okay. And finishing that up. So talk to us. Now, I could go on with this. I could add a little bit of snow over here. I could add a little bit over here. Branches that go straight down, like this really goes down, you got to figure the snow's not going to sit too much on that. So I might not put a little bit of snow on there. But I certainly could finish off the painting by putting a little bit more over here, a little bit underneath the bird over here. Yeah, maybe down sitting in this little V created by these branches. I'd probably give it a little bit more time. A lot of these berries are still very wet. So while you're waiting, you could go grab another refill on your drink, perhaps. Go get a snack. Or if you're in a hurry and you want to get it done, you could take a hair dryer and you could make sure that everything underneath there is nice and dry. So if you have, and the issue that I had where I got a little bit of brown paint, you could grab your white, knock your lights off the table while you're at it. Sure, why not? And you could always come back in and cover up that brown spot if it's bothering you. I probably wouldn't be too bothered by it myself. But you can always cover that up. I'm going to clean off my brush one more time because I'm going to add a little bit of sparkle to this. Just because it's glitter, I've got gold going, why not glitter too and just make it totally awesome, right? I have a couple options here. I mentioned that I have Mod Podge Sparkle, but I also have a bottle of Deco Art called Galaxy Glitter. So it's a little bit smaller if you were working with other people and could really use a big jar of the Mod Podge. You might want to get the Mod Podge, but let's just say that it's just you. You might appreciate having a smaller bottle. So I'm going to squeeze a little bit of that out on my palette. And it doesn't look very clear. It looks like it's got a little tint to it. But again, trust me, it's going to dry clear. I have a clean brush, and I'm just going to scoop a little of that and brush it over the top of my snow, lightly over the top, so that our snow has a little fresh fallen sparkle to it, right? Let's see, let's move that down so you can come, well, grab that area first. If it does happen to get off the branch onto the sky, that's perfectly wonderful. It's just snow that's falling. And because you can't have enough glitter, why not add it to a few of our snowflakes? Why not? Over the top. Maybe even a little bit around the sun, because there's snowflakes falling in front of it. You just can't see yet. You don't want to overdo on the glitter, so just a little bit here and there. I say as I keep going. Hard to stop, isn't it? Okay, well, folks, that's our painting today. Let's just kind of hold it up here again so that we can see. I want to kind of turn it so you get an idea of the little bit, the glitter that I have in there too. There again, the glitter's not necessary. This piece right here was beautiful without it, but I just thought I'd demonstrate it to you today. Okay, well, we're going to draw for that $100 e-gift coupon, and we will post in the feed who our winner is, and then you will just need to private message us, send us a message, and let us know, yes, I'm watching, yes, I see my name here, and we will be able to get your email address from you and get that sent to you. And in the meantime, this has been wonderful. I hope you have my best wishes for the new year. I hope that you have lots of creative time coming up in 2021 and that you truly grow as an artist and as a craftsperson. I thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you in 2021.